A man appears to have fallen from a rooftop into a lower building below. The question remains, though, did he do it to himself, or was he pushed? Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Ray Rivera. Viewer discretion is advised. Ray Omar Rivera was born on June 10th, 1973, and he was actually originally from Madrid, Spain. And I believe he had two siblings. At the time this case occurred, Ray Rivera is 32 years old and he is living in Baltimore, Maryland. He had recently married the woman of his dreams, Allison, and they were a very happy couple. They had been together before their marriage for a very long time. They were originally from Los Angeles, but after Ray was having issues, getting a job in the field that he wanted, his friend would actually convince him to move to Baltimore. His friend's name was Porter Stansbury, and I guess he owned like this financial and stocks newsletter, and he said he basically convinced Ray to move there to do articles on the stocks and whatnot, even though Ray was not really a financial person. He didn't go to school in that field. Ray actually wanted to be a filmmaker. He had a dream of writing screenplays and even being a director. That was his true passion. Ray was also an assistant coach at a local school there. He taught or coached water polo, something he also enjoyed doing. According to a few people, Ray had become unhappy with the job he was doing there in Baltimore. He and Allison had kind of set in place this 24-month plan. We'll move to Baltimore, and 24 months later, we'll move back to Los Angeles. Probably just to do like a reset and to kind of just get, Ray back into the mindset of where he wanted to be. And so by the time this case occurred, he had just grown unhappy with what he was doing. He and Allison were like, all right, we got to move back to Los Angeles because he wanted to pursue his dream of screenwriting. Ray was a very loyal husband. He never, in a million years, would never just pick up and leave his wife or his family in general. That's just not in his nature. But it seems at first to be what happened back in 2006. On May 16, 2006, Ray Rivera he woke up that morning. He made breakfast for his wife, Allison. He helped her load a suitcase into her car because she was actually going on a business trip. They kissed and said, I love you, and said goodbye to each other. And that was the last time Allison would ever see her husband again, alive at least. So she, gets on her plane and she flies out to where she's going. Now, at the time, they also had a woman staying with them. Her name was Claudia. She was a co-worker of Allison's. And so that afternoon, after Allison had already left, Claudia said she last saw Ray at the house sometime around 6:30 p.m. Now, just prior to that, around 4 p.m., she heard Ray take a phone call in the house. Ray said something along the lines of, "Oh, shit." And then she saw him running towards the back door like he was late for something, got into the car and sped away. Then he comes back a little bit later and he, I guess, is in the house for a brief amount of time, and then he leaves again in a hurry. And then Claudia never sees him again. Around 10 p.m., Allison calls Claudia's phone because she's having a hard time getting a hold of Ray. He's not answering his phone, which was kind of unusual. Claudia tells her, well, I saw him kind of leaving the house a few hours ago. He seemed to be in a hurry, but the thing is he left his office light on. He left all of the lights in the house on, which is also unusual for him, especially if he didn't plan to come back. Now, at that point, Allison was like, okay, maybe he's just out with friends. He's drinking with friends. But once she contacts the friends of him, they haven't seen him either. The place where he worked, his coworkers, they hadn't seen him. Allison spends the entire day, the next day, calling friends, calling family, calling anyone she can think of. No one has heard from him and no one has seen him. And so at about 3 p.m. on May 17th, 2006, she officially reports him missing. For the next week or so, they're putting missing persons flyers everywhere. They are going, everywhere they could possibly think of to see where he may have gone. His cell phone had not been used since the last day he was seen. His credit cards and bank account had not been touched since the last day he was seen. Now, he has family flying in from out of state to help Allison and to help the police look for Ray, pass out flyers and whatnot. When they found the car parked in a parking garage and it had a ticket on it. The car was found on May 23rd. This was near the Belvedere Hotel, and this is like a real old school hotel built in like the early 1900s or so. And apparently it's a hotel that actually has had a lot of strange happenings, like deaths and just bizarre things that happened there, including people had taken their life. A number of people had taken their life at that hotel. So they thought of something. Because the proximity of the car to the hotel, they thought, well, let's search the hotel. So they actually asked the employees there, have you seen him? They showed him a picture. They said no. And so they have this inkling to climb to the roof of the parking garage that Ray's car was found in. And when they look down, they see something kind of alarming. They see a pair of flip-flops next to this little circular hole in the roof of the building below. Where that hole was led to an abandoned conference room at the Belvedere Hotel. And so they asked the hotel staff, can we look inside this room? And when they do, they are shocked. They find the body of Ray Rivera. He had been dead for quite some time because his body was badly decomposed. And so police looking at this, their first thing is he did it to himself. He jumped off the roof of the building from the hotel's roof and killed himself. But a lot of people also did not believe that. His brother said, no, that's not my brother. He wouldn't do that. He was also terrified of heights. The last thing he would do would be to go up somewhere high and jump. It just scared the crap out of him. His wife would confirm, yeah, he doesn't like heights. He doesn't go up to places like that, especially on a roof with no railing. Ray Rivera had no history of any kind of mental illness, nothing serious. He had never tried to end his life before. He had not been in any altercations. He and his wife had a really great relationship. There was nothing going on there, like nefarious. There weren't any money issues. The only thing is that he was unhappy with his work that he was doing, and they were planning to move back to Los Angeles. The medical examiner determined that Ray Rivera had multiple fractured ribs. He had punctured lungs. He had lacerations to his body, lacerations to his skull, and his skull had been very badly damaged. He also had 2 fractures to his right leg. The police were like, okay, so that definitely means he did this to himself. And the medical examiner was like, no. He said that the injuries sustained on Ray Rivera's body are not necessarily consistent with a fall. It's not out of the question. It's just the coroner could not determine if this was actually someone who jumped off the roof and landed in the conference room below. And so he listed the cause of death as undetermined. It still is to this day. His body was found, I guess, in a prone position, and by the size of the hole in the roof, it was like this body-sized, as they described it, circular hole. Meaning he did not go through it lying flat or at any kind of angle. He actually fell into the roof perfectly vertically, which is also kind of strange. His flip-flops were found on the roof that he fell into, and only one of them had any kind of damage to it. The other shoe, perfectly fine, but why was it on the roof and not with him? They also found Ray's cell phone on the roof next to the flip-flops. Unbelievably, no damage. It hadn't been used since he disappeared, but it looked like his flip-flops and phone had just been placed there neatly on the roof because it certainly did not break from this really large fall. Ray's body was broken. How come the cell phone wasn't? How come the flip-flops were in normal condition for the most part? It just seems odd. And the police also could not find anything to prove he did this to himself. They couldn't find anything in his life that would make him do this. It seemed very sudden. So yeah, the police's theory that he did it to himself is just like they can't prove it because he had made plans with his wife, like, we're moving to Los Angeles, we're going home, or we're going back. There was just no indications that he was in any kind of despair. His bank account was fine, they didn't have money problems. Why would he do this? The thing that also kind of throws off the police's theory is the fact that the roof where he would have likely jumped from or was pushed from or fell from, whatever the case may be, if you look at the roof and you compare it to where the hole was, there is a 45-foot gap with air conditioning vents and other parts of the building. they're in between the hotel roof and the part of the hotel where he fell into. Ray was wearing flip-flops, and so getting that kind of running leap to he would have to literally run and leap off the building, and he would maybe make it to where he was eventually found. But also, if you're doing that, you might also be falling at an angle and not necessarily straight down. They had another theory that Ray jumped actually from the roof of the parking garage, and that was a much shorter distance. There was about 20 feet of space, and that would have been technically maybe possible. It's also not likely that he could have made that kind of leap. And also, falling from the height of the roof of the parking garage into the conference room would have injured him, but it wasn't high enough to actually be fatal. He could have only have come from the top of the hotel for that to have been a fatal fall. They had another theory. Well, he must have jumped off or fell from a ledge on the 11th floor. But in order for him to get to the ledge where police were saying he would have jumped from, he would have had to go through one of the person's condos, because there were condos in this hotel. He would have had to go through a locked security office to get to that part of the building. So they quickly ruled that out. Well, what about camera footage? Well, they have camera footage of the hotel, but every single place where Ray would have been, they couldn't find him on camera, or those cameras weren't working. And when they questioned staff of the hotel, and they questioned people who were living there, nobody can say they actually saw him. So no one knows how he got to the roof to begin with without being seen, because people would have stopped him if staff had seen him, because to get to the roof, it's not necessarily easy access for just a random person to have. It's not impossible, but someone would have noticed. An alarm would have gone off, something like that. Now, the one thing missing from Ray, and this is what draws up the whole concept of this could be a murder, his money clip was missing. And this he always had like a wad of cash on it and other, items that he needed, like instead of using a wallet. That was missing. It wasn't in the conference room. They didn't find it on the hotel roof. They didn't find it in the car. They didn't find it in the parking garage. They didn't find it in anywhere. Nowhere. It was not on his person. It's gone. And he always had it on him. So the theory is did someone rob him and then throw him from the roof? This would have probably taken two people to throw him that distance. And so was this a really insane robbery? But why up on the roof? That's the thing they don't know. They cannot figure out is how and why was Ray Rivera on that roof? What were the circumstances that brought him up there? That's not known. Without witnesses, without camera evidence, without anything, they don't know. Allison, his wife, is really kind of holding on to the coroner, because the coroner was like, I know the police have ruled this a suicide, but I'm not ruling it that way. That's not, he's like, there's no way I can confirm that he did this to himself. He said that the injuries to his shins in particular were not consistent with someone who fell vertically off of a roof into a room. His shins would have been shattered. His legs would have been shattered if they went into that hotel or into that room that way. Another very mysterious part of this case is that when Allison was looking through his belongings to see if maybe she could learn anything about why this happened, she found this tiny little piece of paper that was put into a plastic wrap thing and taped to the side of Ray's computer. The note, when opened, had a list of names on it, very random names, not really connected per se. They had like famous people, they had people from his life, but people who were really important in his life were not written on this list of names. On the note, one part of it reads, quote, I stand before you a man who understands the purpose and value of our secrets. That's why I cherish them as secrets. When Allison types into Google part of this, like some of these weird cryptic messages to see what they meant, she actually comes across one of the first things is all about the Freemasons. And she learned that Ray kind of had this newfound obsession with the Freemasons. And he had always been that way. He'd always been kind of fascinated by these like secret society type things. But just more of like a buff kind of thing, like a history buff or, that kind of thing. Not like, I want to be a part of it. The note also said, quote, that was a well-played game. Congratulations to all who participated. And then it also says, life is a test to see if you can control your spirit. Take care and enjoy the festivities. it's a series of very bizarre things. You have connections with the Freemasons. You have the lists of names that aren't connected to each other, some famous, some not. And what about that phone call Claudia heard where he said, "Oh shit," and then flew out the house? Well, the police traced that call because they were able to look it up. It actually came from Stansbury and Associates, the place where he worked. But there was no way to determine exactly who it came from because I guess this call came from a switchboard and they were not able to track down the extension of where it came from. They did try to question the associates at Stansbury, but apparently the company put a gag order and did not allow anyone to talk to police. The head honcho, Porter, the guy who's actually friends with Ray, he did not answer calls from police. He did not speak to police when asked if he would come in for questioning. Allison and a couple other people in Ray's life were like, that's very odd. That's just such a strange thing to do. Very bizarre behavior. Telling people not to talk to police, that's suspicious. Well, police also learned that the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, had filed fraud charges against Porter and fined him approximately $1.5 million. This had to do with something along with a Russian firm, something to do with uranium. It's bizarre. And one of the reasons that Ray Rivera had actually come out to Baltimore was to actually help Porter restore the reputation because of this big, lawsuit and charges and stuff. And about 2 weeks before Ray's ultimate death, Allison said that he was exhibiting some just very paranoid or kind of just like he was scared about something, just very strange behavior. The day before all of this happened, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, the alarm in their house went off. And so he jumps out of bed, he gets a baseball bat, and he's like really scared. He's like nervous that someone has broken into the house, but it wasn't anything. And Allison and his family were like, he never does that. He is not a scared person. He was really alarmed by something. Now, while the police didn't find any proof that someone had tried to break into their house, Allison noticed that one of the windows, it appeared that someone had tried to open it. And so she thought that was why the alarm probably went off, even though they had no proof of it. She thinks that someone might have been trying to break into the house that night. What Allison believes, and I could certainly understand why, is that because of this whole Ray helping with the cleanup and trying to restore Porter's name and legacy and all of this stuff, he's doing things in the financial field that he's not ever really done before. But there's this big fraud case, millions of dollars, Porter's reputation, and so did Ray uncover something more that he was not supposed to find out? On the flip side, there are people who believe that this was a money-related, death, that one of the reports, which I guess he called the rebound report that Ray did for this newsletter, apparently he wrote an article that potentially caused someone to lose a lot of money, and there could have been a retaliation thing from that. It doesn't sound like police have ever, I'm not sure if they actually have investigated that or not, but regardless, that person's not considered a suspect or person of interest, or they've never been labeled that. There was a detective initially on the case who was leaning towards this was a homicide and not something that Ray did to himself. However, weeks after the case began, he was reassigned. I don't know if that was just related to the case or if that was already a planned thing, but he was no longer on the case. And he was the only one who was really saying, okay, this may have been a homicide. Ultimately, the police have labeled this a suicide, and that's it. The coroner, however, still says no. This is an undetermined death in my book. Police are saying otherwise. This case was featured on one of the new Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix, so there's a lot more information on there. But I do know that Porter, the owner of that company, is considered a possible suspect in Ray's death. More of a suspect in the eyes of the family and friends, not so much the police. Who called him from Porter and Associates that night where he said, oh shit, stormed out of the building, and then suddenly he's gone forever? Why was he on the roof of that building? Was he on the roof of that building? Was he on the roof of another part of the building? They don't really know. But what brought him to a place where he would have fallen through a roof and into an abandoned conference room? Like, what were the circumstances? What happened? They don't know. Nobody knows how he got up there, why he was up there, and who was he with, if anyone. It really does, if I'm just kind of being conspiracy theorist here for a second, it really does sound like someone did this to him directly. I don't know. There's other ways he could have done it, that would have been so big and dramatic like this. I don't know. The gut feeling is someone killed him. But it's also a matter of how. Like, did he die from that fall? Or was he killed another way and then was thrown into, this roof? Did someone stage it to look like he fell through the roof, but in reality, he didn't. He was beaten to death, maybe, and left in that conference room. But how they have gotten access to that conference room is also a question nobody knows the answer to. There are a lot of questions in this case and very few answers. They have not gotten any kind of closure, any kind of justice here. I do know that since the air of the Unsolved Mysteries episode on Netflix, I know that this case has gotten a lot of tips. There was one person who called in a tip that, because in that note, Ray referenced The Game. And some people thought, oh, is that related to the movie The Game with Michael Douglas? Because in that movie, the main character does jump off a roof through a glass ceiling. And so people were like, did someone stage that death to look like what that movie was? It's a very obscure movie that not a lot of people really know about. I don't think. I've seen it. I know I like that movie a lot. But that movie, if you kind of think about the plot, is as a very kind of like paranoid type movie. And so like there are some kind of, what if something was happening? Maybe he thought he was playing this game. Who knows? Maybe someone was messing with him. I don't know. But it's a good movie if you've never seen it. It's from 1997. It's called The Game with Michael Douglas and I think Sean Penn. The police would later state that they found, reports that Ray was suffering from bipolar disorder, which is not really known to most people. He was unhappy about his job, but I think that was their way of trying to justify, well, see, he did this to himself, right? They can't prove that he did this to himself. Later down the road, there would be a woman who wrote a book, I think, about this case, who was actually staying in the hotel when the night this happened, and there were people who said that at some point that night they heard a really loud bang, which sounded like it came from the roof. Despite when police were initially questioning people, no one said they saw or heard anything. So it's a little strange that this particular woman comes forward many years later after the Unsolved Mysteries episode and says, oh yeah, I was there that night. We heard a loud bang. And she said that typically the roof door was actually unlocked. It was very rarely locked. So he could have gotten up there on his own. Okay, so why are we not saying this way back then? That's the big thing. They actually would, someone got a physicist involved in this to determine, could Ray have made that leap from the roof into the hole where his body went through? And the physicist said if he was running at 11 miles per hour, he could have done that. Okay, so maybe it is possible. But running at 11 miles an hour in flip-flops, that's hard to do. It's hard to walk in flip-flops sometimes, let alone run up to 11 miles per hour. But it is possible. So, I don't know. It's a mystery. You still have the family and friends and acquaintances saying that he was murdered, possibly by someone he worked with or worked for, or maybe someone he wrote a bad report on. You also have one side saying, well, he was in fact battling some mental health issues, nothing extreme, that no one really ever knew about or even noticed. And he was unhappy with his job, and so he just jumped off the roof. It just doesn't make sense, though. Like, none of the circumstances, it doesn't make sense because I don't know. But, we'll never know. We'll never know what he thought. That's the thing, is we can sit here and say and speculate and say things and rumors and theories, but only potentially two people know. One is deceased because he was the victim, and we'll never know what he was thinking. We'll never know what his thoughts and intentions were. But the other side is if he was murdered, there is that potentially one person, maybe more, who do know what happened. Obviously, they're never going to come forward. Someone somewhere out there has got to know the truth about exactly what happened to Ray Rivera in 2006. Perhaps that someone is you. If you have any information on this case, please contact the Baltimore Police Department at 410-396-2411. If you know anything, if you saw or heard anything, please say something. You can be anonymous if you need to. Help a family get answers and closure. And if justice needs to be served, please help get justice. The justice that Ray Rivera rightfully deserves. But that is it for this case. True crime, a Rooney, Dooney, Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, if you're new here, hello, my name is Mike. I tell true crime stories here on YouTube, obviously, multiple times a week. So please subscribe if you are into that kind of thing. Hit the bell so you're notified of when I post new videos. Please like and comment on the videos. That way more people can see it. I also tell short form true crime stories over on TikTok. The link to my TikTok is in the link tree, which is in the description of this video below. So feel free to follow that if you want to. I do post compilation videos though every month from my previous month of TikTok videos. So also in the link tree, you're gonna find my case list. You can actually access it, you can see it and scroll through it. If there's a name that you do not see on that list, and it is alphabetical for the most part, you don't see the name though, send me a quick email. My email is in that list, that document, or it's also in the link tree below, or in the description below, sorry. Send me a quick email with the name of the case, where it happened, when it happened. I'll add it to the list. I typically pick cases at random. However, if you are a loved one to a missing or murdered person, maybe their case is not solved or you just want their story told, let me know in that email that you are a family member and I can make sure your case is a higher priority. So I do those first. But that is it for this video, True Crime Rooney. So until the next case, ta-ta for now.